Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us.
Of course.
If you could give a piece of advice to the younger Salman Rushdie, age 39 in 1987, writing the Satanic Verses, what would that piece of advice be then?
Keep writing. I mean, the truth is, I'm very proud of that book. And I think it's one of the better books I've ever written. And one of the feelings I have is that when it came out, a lot of noise was made by the people who didn't like the book or who didn't like what they'd been told about the book. And that created the problem we know about. And I think now maybe it's time for the people who do like the book to speak up.
Okay. At that time you were accused of doing it on purpose, being provocative on purpose, hurting the feelings of Muslim people on purpose, not being polite. Can you give us your view on that story?
Well, first of all, there's no rule in literature which says you have to be polite. That's really got nothing to do with it, you know. What happens is that you try and tell the story you have to tell. I was trying to write a novel which isn't even primarily about Islam. You know, I mean, most of the Satanic Verses is about immigration from the Indian subcontinent to England in the mid-80s. And it suggests that the act of migration creates a kind of crisis in the spirit, you know, of various kinds. The process of adjustment, you know, to the new world, and that one of the things that is put into crisis is religion, belief systems. And so the novel explores that crisis. You know, it wasn't intended to please or displease any particular religious group. It was an exploration of a moment in a culture. You know, and that's it. Perfectly legitimate thing to do.
Yeah, but then in your new book, you're actually kind of doing it again, aren't you? I mean, you're telling this myth of the Satanic Verses once again.
No, I mean, hang on.
And you're discussing if Muhammad...
No, excuse me. No subjects are off limits. I'm talking about a scholarly account of studying a subject at university. Yeah. And if we're not allowed to do that, then really the world is in a strange place.
But do you think some people are going to read this and be offended?
Well, not unless you provoke them. You know, I think it's really important to be responsible about this. It's perfectly possible for a human being to talk about what he studied at university without being accused of annoying people. Yeah. You know, that's what I'm doing.
But do you expect any reactions?
No, I don't.
From this?
No, I don't.
But have you thought about this?
No, I haven't. No, really. I mean, I don't know why you're concentrating on this. This is a reasonable account of a human being's life. And I'm allowed to write it, full stop.
Okay. But when it comes to this question of being provocative, then I guess you have been asked, and you'll write that in your book, isn't anything sacred anymore?
And the answer is no, but nothing ever was. I mean, you know, it's if you're somebody who is not religious, which I'm not, I don't have to play by those rules. You know, those are rules constructed by ideologies, religions, to prevent any kind of dissent.
Okay.
And it's not a question of being provocative. It's a question of facing the world as you see it. You know, and I've always tried to write about the world as I see it, and that's what I would have thought we ask our artists and intellectuals to do.
Yeah. But you say you don't play by those rules. Who make the rules then? Do you?
No. But I mean, no. The point is, I'm saying there is the only rules of literature are the rules of communication. How do you tell a story well? You know, in this case, I mean, I actually, truthfully, had very little interest in autobiography. You know, it never occurred to me as a young person that I would ever write something about my own life. And then, quite simply, a thing happened in my life, which first of all, I thought, in itself, it's an interesting story to tell. It has sort of thrillerish, almost spy novel-ish aspects. And secondly, I thought that that story, the personal story, connects to a larger subject, which is the subject of what has been happening in the last 15 or 20 years and has become, if you like, everybody's story, not just my story. And so I thought what I could do is to explore those larger areas of freedom of speech and religious extremism and all these different things that come up, but to explore them not theoretically, but through the lived experience of one person, myself, and his family and friends.
Okay. In the book, you say you regret the times when you almost gave in to the pressure. Can you explain that?
Well, I just feel at the time, and very much afterwards, it seemed to me like, it was a moment of despair. It was a moment of great weakness, and I think of it as the stupidest thing I ever did. And
why is that?
Well, because if you're standing up for important principles, as I say, I learned this the hard way. You don't defend those principles by compromise or appeasement. In the end, you have to just simply defend them and stand up for them and just take the consequences. And I think for me, although that was a terrible moment, that moment, and I write about it, I think, quite openly in the book, which I regret, and I was very self-critical about at the time and subsequently. In a way, it helped me because it showed me, you hit bottom, you know where the bottom is. And afterwards, you don't want to go there again. Yeah. And I thought, okay, I'm not doing that again. I'm not going to try and, appease people who don't want to be appeased or compromise with principles which I don't want to make a compromise with. I'm just going to fight my corner. I'm going to say, this is what I believe in, this is what I'm standing for, and this is what I'm fighting for. It just made things clearer for me after that. I think it was a pivotal moment in my life, that moment, and I think after that I became much clearer about not just what to believe, what to stand up for, but how to do it.
Yeah, you're right actually that afterwards, after you've been through all these experiences, then you are much more clear about this is principles that you cannot compromise. Yeah. But still, isn't there a compromise that can be made in the sake of peace and understanding?
Well, if you're fighting against people who are trying to kill you, it's not for you to make peace. That's to say, otherwise, every tyrant, every gangster, everybody menacing anybody else would say it's up to the other person to make peace with me. It's an inversion of moral values. Yeah. So my view was, I have not done anything wrong. I've written seriously all my life about serious subjects and tried to write the best books I could write. The crime is to threaten violence. And we have to understand that if we're going to live in a moral universe, the criminal must be responsible for the crime. People who murdered my Japanese translator, who attacked my Italian translator, who shot William Nygaard, my Norwegian publisher. Those are the criminals, not the people they attacked.
How did you